30% Trump tariffs, still no South African ambassador to the United States, and rampant youth joblessness, crime and corruption back home. Ex-DA leader, diplomat and author Tony Leon reckons it's an indictment of the currently divided government of national unity.
The government overall doesn't have a joined-up strategy to attack the twin evils of unemployment and low growth, and never mind all the other policy requirements or changes that are needed. There's been some improvement, but it's very little. And so I would say it's a very mixed picture.
This not to be missed conversation with Tony comes next. Later in the show, an elusive Josie investment broker who allegedly conned his clients out of millions hands himself over to the police. And finally, Sean Diddy Combs wants a Trump pardon.
To know when the next episode drops, hit the like, follow, and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast channels.
Stay tuned until the end of the show to hear your voice notes. If you'd like to engage us on this episode's topics, you know what to do. Send us your thoughts and opinions to the official Lead WhatsApp line. That number, 072 562 3179. My name's Graham Robenheimer. Let's chat all this and a whole lot more right here on The Lead on News 24. The Government of National Unity is MIA, missing in action, and it's not unified in the nation's interests, except it's every man or woman for themselves in the GNU lately. Well, this is not my opinion, it's the opinion of one former Democratic Alliance leader turned ambassador, Tony Leon, who argues that South Africa's current crop of leaders is currently failing the perfect storm test. Well, he joins us live on the line now here in Cape Town. Tony, thank you so much for your time here on The Lead on News 24. I really do appreciate it, and welcome to your debut show.
Great to be with you and all the viewers, listeners, and News 24.
Fantastic.
Family.
We've got a lot to get into because, of course, there's been, headlines after headlines these days. We're more than a year now into the GNU, Tony. Of course, you've penned this excellent book. It's got so much juicy detail into it, called Being There. And before we get into all of that, how would you describe the current state of the GNU in your own words, given of the multitude of headlines that we're facing at the moment?
Well, I suppose the best you can say for it is that 14 months after it was formed, it's still there. It hasn't fallen apart. On the achievement side, in the overall, you have to say it's been very modest in terms of the success scoreboard, because as I indicated in my column that you referenced this morning in News 24, the basic reason for setting it up, apart from the negative reasons of keeping out the EFF and the MK, was to increase the growth rate and bring down the unemployment rate, and neither has happened on the watch of this GNU. We can interrogate the reasons why it hasn't happened. So that's, I would say, an overall failure. And the second thing is that it's not really a GNU. I mean, that's the other point I made, referencing the Holy Roman Empire, which was brilliantly described in the 16th century as neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Our GNU does not have a joined-up government. I think there's some excellent success stories, largely on the DA side. Let me not say from a partisan point of view. You look at Leon Schreiber at Home Affairs, Dean McPherson at Public Works, and the Deputy Minister of Finance, Ashur Sarupan, trying to help salvage the budget. Those folk are really pushing the boat out, as it were. But the government overall doesn't have a joined-up strategy to attack the twin evils of unemployment and low growth, and never mind all the other policy requirements or changes that are needed. There's been some improvement, but it's very little. And so I would say it's a very mixed picture. Now, of course, if you look at the Rand price and you look at the JSE index and other economic measurements on the socio or the political economic barometer, you could say it could be a hell of a lot worse. So compared to what might have been one of those counterfactuals, maybe just the existence of the GNU has been better than the alternative. But in the overall, it has to, I think, one has to say, it's been modest in its success.
It took us more than 5 months to pass a national budget, quite unbelievable in itself. And of course, throughout that process, the GNU, with the two major sort of bedfellows, the ANC and the DA, had their demands all along. On the one side of it, the ANC wanted to, increase VAT, sick of austerity measures, want more money in. The DA, though, had been pushing for more accountability in terms of, quote unquote, corrupt ministers. But we did pass a national budget. Is there some silver lining in there? And who's, in your view, Tony, the real political winners?
Well, I think the fact that the budget was finally passed after the ANC component government had rowed back on its original design and indeed on its failure to consult its so-called coalition partners was a win, both for democracy and arguably for the public finances. And maybe for the consumer who wasn't met with a direct VAT hit, although indirectly through fuel tax levy increases, sort of VAT came in via the back door. So once again, just like the government itself, something of a mixed picture. But I think what that whole budget saga proved was a reminder to the ANC that it's only a 40% party. Now, the ANC doesn't pay much attention to its lack of a parliamentary majority when it's in the cabinet, where it's awarded itself about 60% plus of the cabinet seats. But obviously the budget isn't approved by cabinet, as recommended by cabinet. It has to be approved or not approved by parliament. And that's where, to the extent the DA has power and the other smaller parties, that's where the power of the opposition or the non-ANC party rests. So I think it was a reminder both to the number one party, the ANC, and to the public at large, that one-way traffic of the ANC proposing and Parliament disposing doesn't work anymore. So maybe, despite the uncertainty, that was a useful and a necessarily good lesson.
Right, and if we put politics aside, of course, the National Treasury, as we've now understood, has put measures in place so that we don't sort of find ourselves in this position again next year. And so it is kind of great for democracy that we now have a closer look at the overall budget process as well, so we know where the money is going. And there's now going to be stopgap measures in place, Tony, to try and hopefully save money. I remain very cynical, but let's hope for the best.
Yes, as you should.
Yes. Look, the ANC NEC now met and they've decided, hey, the markets like this, configuration of the GNU. Let's keep the DA in the fold, despite what the ANC calls their quote unquote theatrics. The Democratic Alliance well. What's the DA's stance on remaining in the GNU from the Blue Party's perspective? Despite obviously losing Andrew Whitfield, now we've seen Emma Powell as international relations spokesperson, resign from that particular post. She stays an MP though. So the DA's lost a little bit there, although, the ANC's also, a couple of scalps have been claimed throughout the process there too. But from the DA perspective, what's the long game here?
Well, I need to put in the necessary health warning, Graham, that I'm not the spokesman for the DA and I don't involve myself in its management. So I'm just giving you an inside-outside perspective. I was obviously, as my book details, in being there, very involved in the formation of the GNU, but that ended last July. So my current view of it is the DA has had quite a number of reverses in terms of its bottom lines that have been ceded or yielded on a range of matters. There's been the Bella Act, there's been the Expropriation Act, there's been the defenestration of, as you mentioned, Andrew Whitfield as a deputy minister. You could outside the GNU, but certainly with the connivance of the ANC, there's been the removal of the previous DA mayor in Tshwane, Cilliers Brink. So there have been a lot of defeats, if you like, in inverted commas, for the DA. But I think, as I understand it, the DA has made a different calculation. They've said broadly, the ANC has not honoured in any major sense the statement of intent. If they had done so, they would have to have consulted and indeed got the buy-in of the DA for a range of measures, acts, and the operational side of government, which hasn't happened in over a year. So I think the DA has made the calculation, well, listen, our supporters like the fact that we're in government, that we are delivering to a lot of people. And suddenly this party, the so-called anti-transformation party, is sitting at the heart of government, is actually making a material difference to a lot of people's lives. And so I think a lot of folk who wouldn't have previously touched the DA with a barge pole might be saying to themselves, well, hang on, maybe they're worth a punt in the next election. And clearly the DA is polling, and not just their polling, but you look at various institutions like the Brentos Foundation polls, the Social Research Foundation, Social Market Foundation, that they show actually the DA's support has increased, and a lot of by-election evidence also seems to reinforce that. So I think what the party is saying to itself, or to its own supporters, is we're going to hang in there, and if the ANC wants to remove us, then so be it, but we won't remove ourselves. Now, how long the ANC is going to sit with that? Well, you saw some murmurings, or perhaps more than murmurings, on the weekend at the NEC meeting, where they said, well, we don't like the DA theatrics, we're going to bring in other parties. Of course, South Africa's problem isn't an absence of government, it's a lack of governance. So bringing in even more parties to this overblown arrangement is not going to cure anything in terms of delivery, in terms of efficiency, in terms of cracking down on corruption, but it might be meeting the internal political needs of the ANC. Now, how that plays out, if the ANC, the DA, already accepted far too few posts, given its proportional size in the original arrangement, for reasons that I canvassed extensively in my book that you mentioned, I cannot see the DA accepting a diminution of its cabinet status. So I think that is the next battle that lies ahead, if it goes ahead on the terms of the ANC-NEC outcome.
Right. Let's shift a little bit globally, and we can sort of come back to domestic politics again, if it's okay. Of course, we're going to Friday's, it's D-date for, Trump's tariffs. They're due to come into effect. The Reserve Bank is sort of saying at this stage, Tony, that, the provisional figures is that, our GDP could take a 0.6% thereabouts hit. We could lose upwards of 30,000 jobs. There's headlines going at the moment that local companies are already having to, forfeit contracts for the future. Whilst at the same time, we don't have a ambassador in the US. We've just got confirmation from International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola that indeed Mcebisi Jonas, our special envoy, has not yet set foot in the United States. Obviously, following the Emma Powell's, made public that there were some visa issues. The presidency didn't like that. Still, the fact remains we're barreling towards these tariffs at the moment. And at the heart of your opinion piece today, and at what we've really alluded to, which is entitled Missing Ambassadors, Mounting Tariffs, South African Leaders Fail the Perfect Storm Test in terms of fighting those two twin things of unemployment and fixing the economy. We are in a little bit of a perfect storm at the moment, aren't we?
Yes, to use a crude analogy, going paddling down S Creek without a paddle, or the paddle has been taken away by the captain, Mr. Ramaphosa. It's an extraordinary situation. Look, in addition to what I wrote this morning, let me tell you what I understand. South Africa has a very expensive embassy. It's one of the biggest in the world in Washington. Whoever is there at the moment, I'm not talking about the absent ambassador, that's 5 months pending. We don't have diplomats on the ground. People I know in Washington who are involved in Africa and Southern African affairs say the South African embassy is nowhere in sight at any gathering or seminar or so on. I referenced in a column last week a very negative piece about South Africa in one of the major American newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, read by everyone in Washington. And there were 668 comments at the bottom of the article. And there was no response officially, publicly or at all, from a single South African diplomat stationed there. So you've got to say, what are these people doing with our money? Since it's very expensive, I continue to run an embassy. They're certainly not doing the basic diplomatic engagement process. So I think that's been a disaster. I'm also advised that the DTIC, the Department of Trade and Industry, was very late to the table with its trade proposals. Now, I'm not here interrogating the merits or the demerits of the Trump tariffs, which I think are pretty punitive. I think they're very casuistic. I think they're arbitrary. There are a lot of things. And I think it's very, very bad policy what he's doing. But that's the reality. It's a big gorilla in the jungle. That's America. It's by far, compared to China, a much more important trade relationship because we actually export far more to America than we do to China. We have a bigger trade relationship with China, but we mostly import rather than export to China. And you can't, as many people, Stuart Theobald today in the Business Day made that clear, you can't just switch your markets overnight.
It's very difficult. It's difficult, Tony, to actually make new markets, to open new markets is what a lot of the economists, just to add to your point, are saying it's not an overnight thing. It takes time.
Well, absolutely. And listen, all right, South Africa's got very bad tariffs, 30%, but a lot of other countries have been tariffed, or most other countries in the world, to a greater or less extent. So the markets that we're going to go into with our product are also going to be sought by other tariffed countries. So it's like you're going into an open space and you can go and send your products there. And if you look at citrus and automotive or motor cars, those are particularly geared, particularly in the Western Cape and Eastern Cape, to the American market. It's in the case of citrus, it's an out-of-season exporter that we go into that market. And you go from zero tariffs to 30%. It's a disaster. And there are whole communities that are now going to be affected. So that's a very grim picture, but it's a realistic one. We have known, not since last month, since last November, when Trump was elected president, the big economic centerpiece of his policies was tariffs. So we have known for the last 9 months or 10 months that this was coming our way. We've known that AGOA was at risk. And yet, if you look at what Ronald Lamola and Parks Tau said on Monday, it was a hastily scrambled together set of proposals, most of which are not actionable. They're in the future, or they have, fantasy things. Phone a help desk.
Yeah, it's a help desk. Apparently, it's been receiving some calls from Western Cape exporters. Tony, that's it. It helps disburse a little bit of information. So, according to our business team, that's one of the only measures that's actually actionable thus far.
Exactly, and even that is on the margin. So, in the substance matters, there's been very little, and I don't know what these folk have been doing who've meant to helm our trade and international relations. I also get the impression, and here's an impression, that's not a cast iron fact, Graham, that I think the Department of International Relations, Mr. Zane Dangor and others who have been pursuing Middle East policy with much enthusiasm and American policy with no enthusiasm, have more or less come to the conclusion that we can't improve our relationship with America. So whatever President Ramaphosa says, let's not do too much because we can't get anything done. So I think there's a degree of dangerous fatalism that now has affected our international posture. But who knows? As I said, we have a leaderless embassy in Washington. We have a grounded special envoy to the United States. And the whole thing is, to use the cliche from my headline article, it's a perfect storm of worsening possibilities.
You're listening to the latest edition of The Lead on News 24 with Graham Rowenheimer. If you've got an opinion on what you've heard so far, drop us a short voice note on our WhatsApp hotline. That's 072-562-3179.
Welcome back to The Lead with myself, Graham Robe, and I'm in conversation with former DA leader, former ambassador in South America, as well as being their author, Tony Leon, who's in that book given us a bit of a sneak peek behind those early days of the Government of National Unity. Well, he's got a new opinion piece out on News 24 in which he argues that the current crop of leaders there not doing themselves any favors, kind of missing in action at the moment as we head towards Trump tariffs and no ambassador in the United States. It's a bit of a perfect storm at the moment. Whilst, global political economy matters, geopolitical matters are super important in terms of trade and bringing other sources of foreign income into this country so that we can hopefully use that in the right areas, infrastructure development, create jobs, etc., etc. Sometimes the argument can be that, our leaders are a little bit too internationalist in nature and that we should be focusing things at home. Yeah, we've got on News 24, and, since I've joined this year, Tony, it's just been coming back from the UK and studying and coming back into the South African fold and reality of things. It's like every week there's a news story of some sort of corrupt case being uncovered in whatever department or municipality. The latest of which, I don't know if you saw this, Tony, the journalist at the Daily Mavericks exposed how the suspended boss at the Independent Development Trust tried to bribe the journalist to try and stop an investigation. We've got auditors being shot and killed in Ekurhuleni for exposing corruption. We've got a lot of things to actually get right here at home. How much confidence do you have in, for example, this new commission, the Madlanga inquiry, to try and get to the root of...
I have no confidence in this kicking the can down the road. I'm a great believer, to quote Winston Churchill, in action this day. Let me just pause on the article you referenced, this Peter Louis Mayberg expose of the suspended boss of the IDT this morning. Now, as you say, it's a bit like, the play Macbeth. There's so many murders and body parts floating about. You lose count, you lose touch, you don't have your sense of reality is just flabbergasted. But I actually took the time, it takes all of 3 or 5 minutes, to watch the Peter Louis Mayberg Daily Maverick video of that bribe offer. It was most extraordinary, even in the, however cynical and overwhelmed you are by the tides of corruption that wave over us here. You've just got to watch this thing. I mean, the senior official and her spokesman, who's now suspended, the IDT boss, physically offers the journalist, and it's filmed, 60,000 rand in cash to not pursue a story about how she afforded or couldn't afford a 12 million rand home in Gauteng. It was so blatant, it was so shameless, it was so breathtaking that, it left me staggered. And so Pontram, praising his fantastically good and brave journalism, which I think one should do, you've got to say, what point have we reached that a very senior official of a major delivery institution of state can do this? Now, going back to your question about the GNU, here, hats off to Dean McPherson, who suspended this person, got an apparently incorruptible board in place, and for his troubles, various parties, including, I have to say, Action SA, amazingly for an opposition party, instead of going after the miscreant, the villain of the piece here, went after the minister. Well, that's for them to answer. But I think, in a way, we talked about the justification or the problems facing the DA. I'm not sure if an ANC minister was at the helm of public works and infrastructure instead of a DA minister, you would have had action taken against someone as blatantly enmeshed in corruption as this official. So, yeah, it's a salutary moment, just the sheer extent, shamelessness. And the reason the suspended CEO could do that, presumably, was because she assumed she'd get away with it. And, without in any sense derogating from the work of Aman Bungani, News 24, Daily Maverick, which is fantastic, South Africa is a strange place because you have a free press that, well, this lady tried to prevent it being free. She tried to buy off the press in this case, but generally you have a free press which, under challenging circumstances, exposes corruption, and nothing happens about it, or very little happens about it. And so it's a kind of yin and the yang, if you like, Graham. But wow, that was quite a moment. It is still quite a moment.
It's Brown Envelope Saga 2.0, Tony.
Yes, the last Brown Envelope man, one of them exposed, of course, was Ibrahim Rasool. When he was Premier of the Western Cape, he used to want to buy all favourable journalism. So there's a long and not so distinguished tradition of this in our country.
Let's end off, Tony, and just indulge me for a second. Your piece today has basically pointed down to the main tenet of it all is that, every man for himself in the GNU. We need leaders that are going to take us forward in a collective way. In your view of the Democratic Alliance, could you see somebody like Jordan Hill-Lewis being the DA leader one day? What's your view?
Well, look, I don't know what I don't know, whether John is staying on or retiring or Jordan's going to put his hand up. There's been indications of both scenarios. Jordan's exceptionally gifted. I've known him since he was at school, quite a while now. He's now the mayor of Cape Town. He has an unusual set of skills coming together that I think means that he could be successful as a political leader anywhere in the world. It's not just a parochial thing about South Africa. And I think he has many gifts. And I think, as a resident of Cape Town, I'm appreciative of those gifts. But what he's going to do and where he's going to take this stage of his political career or keep where he is, I don't know. But he certainly is politically gifted.
Right. And in being there, your book that takes a closer look behind the scenes, if you will, in the early days of the GNU, you've essentially stated how Helen Zille, the former DA leader, had played such an intrinsic role in sort of being the glue that kept the GNU intact in those early days, despite the toing and froing there. Yes, there's been a little bit of, bluster or hands being put up about her possibly standing for mayorship in Johannesburg. Thoughts on that very quickly?
Well, look, Joburg is in a terrible mess. And, I started my political career as a city councillor in Joburg, so I mourn what's happened there. And I spent most of my life living there, and I love Joburg. But when I see what happens, your love turns to anguish. So I think Helen would be a vast improvement on anyone in the ANC bench of leaders or non-leaders of that metro. Of course, you've got to say she was elected when I was still the leader of the DA in 2006, mayor of Cape Town. That was 20 years ago. So 20 years on, there's a whole, new set of challenges in a different municipality, but she certainly has a lot of energy and drive. And I guess she could add some points to the DA scoreboard there. Some people have said to me, well, why doesn't the DA have other people who can come to the fore? Well, in politics, you've got to deal with what you have, not what you wished you had. So I think it might be a choice that resonates with the voters. Let's see what happens next year.
And then sort of lastly, and indulge me as the journalist here, Tony, just to end off. Alan Winde's premiership is also coming to an end, like Cyril Ramaphosa's second term in office. Alan has been remarkable in the sense that, he was often in the headlines as MEC for various of the projects that he had undertaken, finance and tourism and otherwise. And here can you believe it, his second term as Premier sort of coming to an end. Who replaces Alan Winde in the Western Cape, the stronghold of the Democratic Alliance, has been a question that's sort of been talked about and asked here in the News 24 newsroom in recent weeks as well. Your thoughts?
When you find out, let me know. I don't know. Look, there's still a while to go. I'm sure he doesn't, I've known Alan since he was one of only 5 members we had in the provincial parliament way back in 1999. So he's really been the distance. Very loyal, very committed, very good EQ, and a very safe pair of hands. So I'm sure he will be missed, and I think he's done a very creditable job as Premier, and even before that as the MEC. I don't know. Look, it's I think it'll be highly contested. I hope it is. You don't want to sort of it's not North Korea, I always say. The DA is a democratic organization. They must have proper contests. I think there are some challenges, despite what I think is very good governance, because if you see the recent by-election results, where the PA party is eating into DA support, particularly in coloured areas, first in the rural areas, now in Paarl, Parel the other day. So I think whoever is going to lead the party needs to have a game plan and needs to have the charismatic gifts that not just retains votes, but adds voters to the scoreboard. That's always the test for a political leader. Not only do you have a theory of the case, that's very important. What do you stand for? What's your belief system? What do you offer? but can you make it attractive and meaningful to voters that you have and voters that you need to have? And I would judge whoever wants to stand against those tests.
Right. Ending off, your book being there, taking us inside the GNU in those early days, Tony, to end off, how's the reception been to that? Are you happy with the sales? Are you already eyeing another possible book? What's on the horizon for Tony?
Well, I'm still, it's been out for 3 months. It's done very well. It's been the bestseller list. Look, it's a small book buying market in South Africa, but my publishers are very pleased. And we've done a lot of events. I'm going off to Joburg to do some more next week and another one in Cape Town. So it's still out there. Look, the book obviously isn't just about the GNU. It's about a whole lot of political leaders, past, present, and even some who likely to shape our future, and also events and famous leaders who've passed on. Not just Ramaphosa, he's still with us, but Mandela, de Klerk, Buthelezi. And also what I think after a lifetime of observation, participation, constitutes good, bad, or indifferent leadership. So I've looked at that. My GNU diary, which really was a day-by-day account of how the GNU was formed, obviously was correct from what I witnessed, the meetings I was at. There might be other views that will come to the fore. And then I did have 2 or 3 chapters looking at the prognosis, what's going to happen in the GNU. Well, it's still standing, which I did think was the most likely outcome. But how to operationalize it better, I also make a few suggestions. Whether they'll be taken or ignored, we'll have to see. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, this book and its afterlife.
Do you think, final question, I promise, then I'm out your hair, Tony. Do you think you could ever enter politics again?
I think it's very unlikely. Look, I think, as I say in the last chapter, which deals with when I quit the leadership and what I thought constitutes a worthwhile political life, I think knowing when to go is an underappreciated political skill. And I left when I'm 50, so that was, 52. So that's 16 years ago. I have absolutely no appetite to go back, but, I'm not looking for a role. I'm not looking for a position. I'm doing a lot of different things outside of politics that make me very happy. But, I didn't anticipate being involved in the GNU negotiations. When John Steenhuisen asked me to, I agreed because that was what I thought was in the national interest. So never say never, but it's I don't thirst to go back into politics. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
Meanwhile, Tony Leon, of course, former ambassador as well, being their author, heads up a communications company as well, and he's an opinionista on News 24. His latest piece, Missing Ambassadors, Mounting Tariffs, South African Leaders Failed the Perfect Storm Test. If you're a subscriber of News 24, you can go and read that right now. You can listen to this very conversation and watch it as well now on The Lead on News 24. Tony, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it, and for indulging this journalist on a Wednesday in August in 2025 to have such a fantastic conversation with you. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Graham. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate the invitation.
Trending topic.
To our trending topic now, and we've got an update in our June 9th edition of The Lead entitled Meet the Josie Broker Who Disappeared with Millions from Friends, Family and Clients. A smooth talker who apparently plied clients with fantastic food and drink, convincing many into handing over their precious millions, only to evade questions when it was time to cough up. This is how numerous clients at the time had previously described the elusive Johannesburg investment broker Mark Kretschmer to News 24. Now, the update today from our journalists on the story, Ivan Pius and Jan Krunier, is that Kretschmer's now handed himself over to the police. Following allegations that he stole millions of his clients' investment money, News 24 understands Kretschmer is expected to appear in the Alexandra Magistrates Court on a charge of fraud this Thursday. Kretschmer is said to have reported to officers at the Bramley police station. That's after one of his victims had opened a 2 million rand fraud case. Now, the combined losses from clients that our team of journalists had spoken to amount to in the region of around 40 million rand in people's life savings. We're awaiting further comment on the story. We'll update you as and when it develops.
Buying a car? Let driving with J9 steer you right.
The reason why I wanted you in today is because I want to talk about car sales. You were in that space for a few years as a salesman.
News 24's motoring podcast, hosted by Janine van der Post, delivers sharp car advice, expert test drives.
Nowadays, when somebody, for the most part, when somebody walks into a dealership, they know sometimes more about the car than the salesperson does because of the access to information.
Yeah.
The latest trends and motorsport interviews, all in one smooth ride.
But I mean, these are basic questions that people really need to know. And I think at the end of the day, you just really need to do your homework.
Catch Driving with J9 on News 24 or wherever you get your podcasts. And finally,
disgraced hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs now wants to be pardoned by US President Donald Trump, his lawyers since confirmed. Combs was convicted on prostitution-related charges last month. He's expected to be sentenced this October. But in a recent TV interview, Trump claimed Combs became hostile toward him once he ran for office. Yet, before, the pair got along great, according to Trump. Trump was asked if he'd pardon the music mogul, and he replied he wasn't inclined to do so. The 2 counts Combs are guilty of each carry a 10-year imprisonment term. Combs, though, was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking. From a disgraced hip-hop star turning to Trump for freedom to a hard look at the GNU as it barrels toward Trump's tariffs. Well, we just can't escape the Donald, can we? On this day in history, the 6th of August 1990, the government and the African National Congress reaffirmed their commitment to the Grote Skuur Minute at discussions held at the presidency in Pretoria. The discussion group reached consensus on several issues, such as the release of political prisoners, return of exiles, obstacles in the Internal Security Act, and suspension of violence by the ANC as part of the ongoing negotiations to end minority white rule. This consensus between the two parties became known as the Pretoria Minute. That's courtesy South African History Online. Turning to your voice notes now, let's hear them in response to our previous edition entitled No Deal Yet. What does Trump's 30% tariffs mean to you? There we spoke to top business journalist William Brederode about what to expect once these tariffs come into effect on Friday. What is the GDP and job losses expectations looking like? Will we trade more with China? How do these tariffs at the end of the day impact you? And let's have a listen to some of your voice notes now.
I don't think what Trump has done is there is a maturity in it. I don't think so. I don't think that is good. And more especially if you look at the companies that are 500 plus from America are operating in South Africa, but we only have less than 200 companies that are operating there in USA. We open all our arms to them to accommodate them in South Africa, but they fail to accommodate us.
The reason why Donald Trump is trying to destroy South Africa, it's not because of our reputation or our history. No. It's because we're fighting amongst each other. EFFDA, NPA, ANC. It's about power. And it don't have to be that way. If we as a country can come together, put our heads together, brainstorm, give each other solutions, come up with one plan, I'm telling you, we are going to defeat whatever is going on right now.
Good morning. Let me just add my view. Man, I think that the tariffs from Mr. President Trump, they are very unfair, and is making America to be the enemy of everybody, because the whole world is just slapping them with tariffs. And it's not just giving us pain. Also, the Americans who are benefiting from the products of other countries, they're also going to suffer.
Thank you so much for all of your voice notes. Please do keep them coming in relation to today's topic. You can do so on 072-562-3179. Even some of your mails, you can send them through to thelead@24.com. Only one more show to go for the rest of this week if you want to find out exactly when that drops. You got to hit follow, subscribe, and like on all of our various platforms, Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And a video of my discussion with Tony should be coming out Thursday morning, early hours, so look out for that on our YouTube site. My name's Graham Robenheimer. So long as there's news, we'll always have the lead.